What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 12th episode of the Coughy Show. We are late again today, or this week I should say, because we had a new HVAC system getting installed yesterday, finally. I know a couple people have come in the last few weeks and it's been a heat box in here.
Yeah, hot box.
Hot box, heat box.
It was terrible.
Yeah, it was pretty shitty.
It's like either way too hot or way too cold.
Right.
No happy place.
But we are now regulated.
Yes, finally we have air.
So reminder this week, we got the Best of Omaha party on November 15th from 6 to 9 p.m. at Beercade in Benton. We are going to put a poll on Instagram and Facebook. We're trying to decide if we should do Orsi's Pizza like we always do, or change it up and get some Mexican food. So like tamales, salsa, beans, rice, keep it brown.
Yeah, real Mexican food.
We're not Mexican food. We go to
Taco Bell.
Jacobos.
We're not doing some whack-ass Mexican food.
Yeah.
We also confirmed it's 18 and older. You just have to be 21 to drink, obviously. But if you're 18 or 19, you can still come. But nothing under 18.
Come drink some water with us.
I'll buy you a Sprite. A little Shirley Temple for the children.
Yeah.
What do they call it for boys? Roy Rogers? What was it?
See, I always got Shirley Temples. I don't know what the difference is between the two.
Same thing, but one's a boy name and one's a girl name.
Oh, really?
They're so archaic.
Fuck that. Give me a Shirley Temple.
Right. That grenadine.
So first thing we got, big announcement this week, is that the Hemp Rules have finally been released. And a lot of people are not happy with them. Which I guess was to be expected. I mean, when does the government ever get it right on the first take?
I'd say the good thing is looking at it's something that's better than nothing. At least you have some sort of guidance. Obviously, it's going to have to be rectified and changed throughout time, but
Definitely. And they do have this isn't set in stone yet. Like, I guess they have a period where they're going to take questions and concerns and stuff like that and try to alleviate some of those concerns.
Yeah, and it looks like some of the big standing out points that people aren't happy with is like as far as local law goes, but you have to think USDA is obviously a federal program, so they can't override what your state laws are going to be.
Well, so the state can still has the right to restrict the growth, but they don't have the right to interfere with interstate commerce. So if you're going from like Oregon to Colorado and like those truck drivers were.
Yeah.
And you got a truck full of hemp, they can't do anything about it.
Good.
Imagine
that's all the
a step
hemp
in the right
lawyers
direction
that are going to start popping up pretty soon.
Right. Oh, they're already out there, man.
Just big law firms dedicated to hemp and THC, that'd be tight.
So one of the crappy points here is that they can't work with labs that they've already established relationships with. All testing must be done through a DEA facility.
I guess that's a shitty one, but that's also a good one because we see all these articles of lab testing companies that
fake labs and stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, at least if you're going through somebody new and these people have to be approved by the DEA, that you're not either getting burned with shit or that you're not gonna end up high as hell when you don't plan on it or you can't be.
Right. So I don't fully understand whether you have to get it tested through a DEA like owned facility or if it's a facility that's like registered with the DEA. So their lab got some sort of DEA certification, because the thought here is that they're going to have problems with people pulling down crops and needing to get them tested within this 15-day period, and these labs could potentially be backed up. And because I mean, you got people pulling down millions of pounds across the country, and everybody has to have those tested within a 15-day window.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see that will be one thing that's changed. I think that's a misinformation that they don't really fully understand. Because like you said, if you're doing 20,000 acres, how are you going to get 20,000 acres pulled down in 15 days? And then if you've got hundreds of labs and across the state that all have thousands and thousands of farms, there's no manpower right off the bat to actually do that. Especially not being able to use, your own people. You've got to go to this set person. I don't think that's going to work out well. And like they say that the THC content tends to go a little higher the longer that the plant is up.
Yep.
They also are...
So they're making these people pick their crops early.
Yeah, and the weird part was like figuring out, they say like some people are going to want 9 inches of the plant tested, some say 6. Like, I don't see that being much of a difference, but It's just that extra little step that's just gonna be fucking stupid.
And then the crops that are testing hot, which means they're above that 0.3% limit, are still considered a controlled substance, and they have to be disposed of by the DEA.
Which is extremely stupid, but like a lot of people are saying, you know, it sucks for the farmers because they work so hard to use that shit. Like, put that back into the soil. Like, you know what I mean? Use that as like a fertilizer.
Put it back into the soil, feed your cattle or whatever animals you have. Like, there's so many uses that it could still be used for without people, you know, again, it's still under 1% THC. People still aren't going to get high, but...
And right, in 2019, nobody wants that. Yeah. Nobody wants 1% THC.
They want 20 or 30% THC. Like, who comes up with this archaic rule that it has to be 0.3%?
Yeah, I'll never understand that. It's just like, okay, you say that's like not the mind-altering, but I mean, we've learned from those courses that, what is it, in China, it's 12% THC and below is hemp.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, like, China's obviously a much more regulated country than the United States. They're saying 12% and below. We're not even at 1% and below. We're at 0.3%.
So there are actually a lot of petitions I've seen going around from farmers and business owners and stuff that are trying to push for a 1% threshold here in the U.S. so that, these farmers have a little more wiggle room so they don't just have to trash their whole yield.
I could see, like, making sure that it is destroyed, especially in those really strict states that aren't going to allow it. So, you know, that way it's not just getting, like, backdoored, sold out.
Right.
But not just, like, having them burn it. That's just, like, silly.
So moving on, we've got a article from CNN following up about the vape deaths. So they say just 2% of cases, but almost a quarter of the deaths happen among people over 65. Of 29 deaths analyzed in the new report, the median age was 45 and 59% were male. The youngest death was 17 and the oldest was 75. So I don't know if that's like, you know, vitamin E affects people different. So is it all vitamin E that's the issue? Or is it possibly just moldy, contaminated product and these older people have weaker immune systems, so they're dying off faster?
Yeah, and then
they're not old per se. I mean, 45 isn't necessarily old, but it is older.
Yeah, and you got to think of their lifestyle. You know, if they're extremely unhealthy people, and then, you know, it's something that gives them popcorn lung from the vitamin E. All these factors that really prove it's okay. It's not just, you know, it's not your Juul pod that's killing your children. Obviously, we've established that. Anybody with common sense knew that it wasn't just vaping. May not be the best alternative, but you got to think, like, you know, do people have pre-existing conditions? Do have people, you know, smoked cigarettes their whole life and they're prone to pneumonia and bronchitis? There's so many extra factors so that, I mean, I applaud the CDC for figuring out and at least being honest and saying, hey, we're really telling you not to vape these weed cartridges. I don't recommend vaping, but for sure we're saying these cartridges tend to be the blame.
Yeah, they're telling you not to vape at all.
Yeah, well, they'll always do that. Big Tobacco still owns them.
Right.
Somebody's paying those bills.
So, what was the other thing I wanted to mention here? So now in total we're up to 36 vaping-related deaths identified in a total of 24 states. As of October 22nd, there are more than 1,600 lung injury cases associated with e-cigarettes in 49 states in the District of Columbia.
Well, that's good. Well, at least
that's a lot of people.
Yeah, at least they can quit with these stupid vaping bans that everybody's talking about and worried about. And
right.
It's just a silly one. People will vape forever.
Right. So then, as you did mention here, the data does continue to point towards THC-containing products. That was a quote from Dr. Ann Schuchat. That's the CDC's principal deputy director. I'm sure I butchered that name. And then the director of the Center for Tobacco Products of the U.S., Mitch Zeller, cautioned that this data largely rely on self-reports, which may be unreliable. So like we mentioned before, not all of this, but most of this stuff happens or is more prevalent in non-legal states. So people are less apt to admit that they're smoking marijuana.
Yeah, which I mean, I understand being scared, but it's not worth your life. It's
your
not
doctor's
worth
like your
dying.
lawyer. You got to be honest with them.
Yeah, for real. It's not worth dying over a cartridge. No. Your off-white cartridge and your Supreme cart is not that deep, buddy.
Right. So our last article here is some local CBD news, or I guess local hemp/marijuana news from KETV. So they mentioned this a few weeks back that now the Douglas County Crime Lab has validated their field test, and they're going to be pushing that out to local law enforcement. So the test will turn purple for hemp and then turn blue for marijuana. The odd part here is that the Douglas County deputies are still carrying around the old tests. Yeah. And then they have to call a supervisor to do the new test. Like, why does the government always have to add these extra steps? Like, what does this guy got to come out and do this? Like, it's just those normal, like, field drug test kits where they put it into a little bag with some chemical and it changes color. Like, why don't you just eliminate the old test?
Yeah, and they're saying it's because the new one is 3 times more expensive. So I'm guessing, if they have a reason to believe that it still is marijuana when you're claiming it to be CBD, at least, you've got the option of having somebody come out and do it. And like you said, there's still field tests. I get not wanting to just immediately roll out this to every officer because, whether you like them or not, they still have a budget to keep track of. The more money that they need and that they spend, the higher the taxes are constantly going to go.
True, but so then the question is, are they still wasting money on these old tests that are basically just being overridden in pretty much every case? Because, how else are they going to tell whether it's hemp or marijuana?
Yeah. I could see that maybe they'll make the move to it. And the test, they say, this is just a field test. It's still going to have to go to a lab, and they're still going to do, more investigation. I would see that it would be, even more of a thing. If it's a small amount, I don't think that it's going to make much of a difference. But I would imagine people that have, a half ounce of CBD flower, or an ounce of CBD flower, right. Then you get into that area of like, okay, well,
Yeah, because at that point they need to determine whether you get that ticket or not.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if it's under, they may just say, hey, destroy it, do whatever, we're going to take it, you get a $60 fine.
Right.
But if you got, weight, then, and it really is CBD, especially as somebody that would be, a distributor on a legal scale of CBD flower, then at least you've got that option to be like, yep, we were wrong. Here you go. Here's your ID. Go ahead and be safe today, buddy. That'd be so much better.
So our last article here is from Houston, and it's titled "Things You Should Ask Before Trying CBD." One thing I liked in here is they mentioned a doctor he's the instructor of immunology at Baylor College of Medicine, recently partnered with Sunset Animal Hospital on a controlled CBD trial involving a group of 25 dogs that had been pre-diagnosed with arthritis. So they said that they're giving them a beef-flavored tincture that they're just squirting onto their food, and after a month, they say that the results were staggering. So the quote here says, on average, about 40 to 50% reduction in symptoms. We saw a really good safety profile. No adverse events were reported. These dogs were moving around easier, more willing, and able to run, to jump, and play. The owners said that the dogs were actually very happy. I'm much more of a believer now. Yeah, so I love seeing these doctors doing real tests, and converting over. They believe it now too. You've seen this stuff actually work.
Yeah, and obviously here, I think everybody here that has a pet, whether it be a dog or a cat, I don't think anyone's actually never tried it on an animal, but it's so much better to get these small controlled studies, because then those will always open the door into bigger ones, eventually involving people and, kids, a lot of people that could use it. And also, it's fucking sick that your dog feels better. That's tight.
Right, and you didn't have to give him something that had an adverse side effect.
Yeah, I did gabapentin and tramadol with one of my dogs forever, and the dude walked around like he was on Xanax. He couldn't even stand up. But I cheat. He's old, so he's got to eat CBD gummies. That's the only thing that he'll actually like. Otherwise, he's too smart. But he likes it, and then he's not falling down all the time.
Right.
especially the cold, you know, it got so cold so quick. He's just struggling. So I just like,
yeah, that'll mess with their joints.
Yeah, I'm like 2 gummies for me, 1 gummy for you. Bet. Let's get lit together.
See, that's why I just squirt it onto their food, and they don't really. I mean, because I do a mix of dry food and wet food, so you squirt it in there, they have no clue. They turn it up.
That worked for me for a couple weeks, but man, he's too fucking smart. You'd just see like 6 pieces of food left behind all the time, and I'm like, oh, this fucker doesn't want it.
Those are the ones that were coated.
Yeah, exactly. I did bread for a little while too, because he wouldn't notice it in bread. Just put it on and just like, here you go. Look, I'm eating a sandwich. Here, take part. But yeah, I'm glad, and I hope people keep trying it with their animals. We had a woman for a long time that I just seen a week or 2 ago. She was doing CBD for her horse. I'm like, man, that's a lot of CBD, but...
Yeah, they're going to require... I mean, just like anything else that you give a horse, I mean, horses aren't cheap to maintain, to feed them, to keep them healthy, you know, everything surrounding a horse is, you know, they're big animals.
Yeah, the horse is 26 years old and it's been started to go blind in both eyes, but if she keeps up with the CBD, it doesn't get as much anxiety from not being able to see anymore, because that was the only problem, was it would freak out, because I mean, like anything or anyone, you wake up and you're like blind one day, that's got to be a big shock to you. And especially, you know, with the people and humans, there's a lot more that you could do to get around and function. But as far as an animal goes, you know, they're not going to know what to do when they just can't see what's in front of them.
They're relying on you.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, she came in a few weeks ago, and she's like, oh, do you remember me? And I was like, oh, now I do, because no one else has ever asked for CBD for a horse before.
Right.
That's a pretty one-off request.
We had one lady before. I wonder if it's the same lady from Iowa. Because, they stock up on it pretty big.
Yeah, she was back in town a few weeks ago. That's who it was.
Yep, so we got one horse lady.
There we go.
All right, guys, that's all we got this week. We'll catch you next week.
Have a good weekend.